Thank you. Okay, good. All right, so welcome back, and we are live streamed to all of the schools now, and we're so excited that you're back with us. Andrew has been with us through all the Buck Institute sessions, and he's been delightful. And all of you who have given feedback, who have attended his sessions, have said that he is very worthwhile. And honestly, we know that, and we know we're in for an engaging afternoon with Andrew. And so, with no further delay, I'm going to let Andrew take over. So let's welcome Andrew Miller. Thank you.
Right. Okay. Good afternoon. We are going to just get started, get moving. Welcome to our quick session on project-based learning and assessment practices. One of the things that I noticed that teachers always struggle with is assessment, and something I always talk about, and it's really true. I think everyone in here, did anybody feel like out of their teaching program, like when you get your cert or even your master's, like you don't know how to assess? Like they don't give you enough. Like I feel like, and then you get into the field and they're like, assess students, and you're like, I don't know what that means. So I think it totally makes sense that everyone is calling for help in that process. I think it makes total sense because we're not often given the tools. And so we're going to do this, and I know that a big focus of the work is going to be on assessment. I know that moving forward, I know that is part of the vision, but let's be honest, we don't want it to be another thing, right? No, please, I don't have time for another thing. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to do my best to talk about PBL, do a little bit of review of that, but then connect assessment practices into project-based learning so you understand the full picture and how they both help each other out. So to start that process, I always like to start or have a session that has some sort of a driving or essential question. And so this is going to be the question that we are going to investigate together. And so what I'm going to be asking you is this. So for people here, I'm just going to ask you that you use Post-its and a writing utensil to write down any questions you have that connect to this larger question. We call these need-to-knows. What do you need to know to answer this question? For those on the live stream, we would ask that you would do the same at your tables. What are the things that you need to know to get that done? You'll also notice that there is the hashtag. Please tweet out any of your need-to-knows about assessment, and we will have our wonderful, fantastic Twitter table share out some of the highlights that they're seeing. So for right now, everyone, let's generate a list of questions and need-to-knows. Okay, back in 4, 3, 2, and 1. Thank you so much. I apologize for using the quieting technique, but I have 100 of you in here, so I got to manage it a little bit. Here are your next steps, and this is the next steps for everyone out there as well. Now that you have some need-to-knows generated on Post-its, I want you to select your top 3 that you've come up with, like the top 3 burning questions you have, and send a representative with those Post-its up to our wonderful need-to-know list and put it right up there. And make sure that back at home at the schools, you are doing the same thing. You should have a need-to-know list. Grab those Post-its, select your top 3, and put them up there. Let's do that now. All right, welcome back. Thank you so much. I want to thank you for the questions. What I'm going to do now is, again, I'm going to go look and see what we came up with here at St. Anthony's to see kind of what we're all at. And I may skip over some if there's some similar ones, or just say, oh, look, here's another one that's just about that question. And then we'll see what the Twitter sphere has been tweeting up over there and see if they've got similar questions or different ones. So here we go. I've got, how can we link reflection and assessment? How does assessment best fit inclusion? What is the scope and sequence of summative? Are we talking about formative and summative? Does everything need to be assessed? What when is assessment relevant or not, the weight of assessment, the timing of assessment, how can we make sure that our assessment is authentic, what are some good types of formative assessments, what is developmentally appropriate, how do you differentiate assessment, what are some good practices in assessment, how many times should I assess formatively, and related to that, just how much assessment should I be doing. There's another questions around the difference between formative versus summative assessment. What are we assessing? What outcomes are we assessing? And are we making sure that we're assessing skills and process, but at the same time celebrating the product of the actual project? So how do we make sure that that project is actually assessing learning? And I think that's kind of where that one's getting at. And how do I assess along the journey? There's a lot of great questions there. So let's see if we can turn it over to our wonderful Twitter table to see if they've got maybe some top questions, either that are similar to the ones we've talked about or ones that are a little bit different.
Okay, I have one from Freet. How can assessment meet needs of all students? And then I have one from DJ Freet. How should assessment be more formative or more summative? Should there be a balance?
At Mark Sylvester said, one rubric doesn't meet the needs of the whole class. And how do we assess and teach creativity?
Okay, great. Those are really good ones too, because we know that in project-based learning, one of the essential components is not only the content, but the 21st century competencies or skills that we want. And it's a really good question. Many people think you can't teach and assess creativity, and I would say, yes, you can. And I'll talk about that. So the other reason I wanted to do that sort of activity is, remember, I like to try to practice what I preach. So here I am talking about PBL, and I like to at least practice some of those elements, right? And when you launch a great project, you give a good driving question to kids, and you ask them what they need to know. So I kind of did that with this. I was trying to model that process of project-based learning. Again, it's modeling the inquiry. It's launching the inquiry for kids, right? So that you can make sure that you're going down the path that you want and get some great questions that relate to the content and skills that you need to teach. That's the main reason I wanted to do that. So to also model assessment, we're going to do kind of I guess, our own little formative assessment checkpoint here. And if you could all grab that wonderful, in here we have that wonderful packet that you grabbed when you came in the door. I know many of you are taking some notes there, but there is one specific form that I want you to grab in that wonderful packet. It is, for us, it is a nice yellow form. This nice yellow form is the Project-Based Learning Essential Elements Checklist. For those of you who have been through a Project-Based Learning 101 with me, this is totally familiar to you, and you've seen this before. So what we're going to do now is, in a second, we are going to use this checklist to assess a project. We're going to watch a video of a project and see whether or not that project, is really a PBL project. We're going to do that. So take a minute silently to yourself to just read over this checklist, and then I'll begin. I see that many are finishing up their reading. They're getting near the end of it. So again, we're going to watch a video, and we're going to assess whether or not this is really, truly a great, perfect PBL project.
We start with immersion, where we dive in and begin to become exposed to the realities of what we're trying to pursue.
English teacher Susan McCrae is explaining a learning expedition to parents who are considering enrolling their students at Casco Bay High School.
Then building background knowledge. In social studies class, they looked at the Great Depression and tried to unearth what happened in that economic crisis and how can we...
The project McCrae and her students are diving into explores the realities and impact of homelessness in their hometown of Portland, Maine.
Then investigation comes, and that's when we started these documentary projects, where we went out and had the opportunity to talk to people who've experienced homelessness.
The work that we do, that we believe in, it has to be compelling and it has to be looking at the real world. So we designed this expedition to act as a case study of one policy issue. Policy is compelling because it is about need, but it can become very academic. And I think what we can lose is the notion of human story and how these issues impact and affect real lives.
Okay, how long have you each been homeless?
I've been in and out of the shelters on and off for like 22 years.
So what this project has done is allowed us to look at the historic piece while at the same time looking at the contemporary economic crisis, and then to really make a link with a human being.
So how did that affect you?
Because of the way you have to live and the fact that you may not be proud of it, wears on your self-esteem. No matter how good your self-esteem is, it's very draining.
Even knowing that there's a large homeless population in Portland, like, it's something you know, but actually being able to talk to people about it's something really different, and that's what I really like about expeditions like this. You get to really know it rather than just look at it and be like, oh, that's nice. Like, you're immersed, so.
You know the drill, yeah. Keep that a little bit higher up.
During the 8-week project, students will write their own individual profiles and contribute to a group multimedia presentation.
Should I redo that?
Yeah, we got to read it.
I mean, it's incredible what we're able to do. So simply, we just click on GarageBand and it goes. Everybody's got a cell phone that can take a picture, and everybody can load the image onto the computer in the classroom instantly. And with my LCD projector, boom, we're looking at people's work.
We talked to Alden in the back room of Down Home Cookin', a small coffee shop on Preble Street.
I think it's easy for people sometimes to think, oh, well, that's multimedia. It's kind of gimmicky, right? It's just for the sake of the polish. Where's the learning in it?
You've been homeless on and off for 3 or 4 years now.
Well, you know, I try peer critique all the time. I'm still trying to work on how am I going to make peer critique happen more effectively when we work on our writing. And in this project, they've each written their personal pieces, and then I've asked them to each take a piece of that in their team to produce one story. Well, the process that went on there, I mean, kids were riveted. And here, there's this authentic reason. They're going, you know, I think we should use your opening. You know, because I really liked your description of the setting and what was going, and the character there. And that's high-level thinking and crafting of narrative. Yes. They're critiquing.
Something that was really working was like their slides. I don't know how to explain it, but it just kind of meshed, like with their words.
Nice, yeah.
People lose hope out there, Pat remarked, talking about why homeless people stay homeless. They get stuck and feel like there's no way out.
On this night, McRae's students read the profiles they've written to this group of parents. Days later, at a local art gallery, they will present their multimedia products to their primary audience, the subjects of their work.
We walked up 3 flights of stairs in the Oxford Street shelter, past 154 6-inch thick mats.
The process is driven by culmination because we all get involved when we know that we have a real audience. And our real audience is our community, but most significantly, the people we interview. What could matter more than making sure the story is right for them?
If we turn back on, there we are. So go ahead and we'll do, again, back at the schools. And here, let's do a little table talk. Look at the checklist. Have a conversation. What are you seeing? What are you not seeing? Okay. Now, normally I would love to debrief this. For time, I'm going to move forward. But I want to highlight some things that I heard as I walked around and formatively assessed you all. Ha, 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 ha. Something I did notice, some people saw some things that were pretty strong. Some people saw, for example, that there was a lot of revision, critique, and reflection where they would take ideas, make it better, improve their work. There was that. Obviously, a really great public audience in that project, right? I mean, here they were not only presenting to parents and community members, but also to the subjects of the work they were doing. And we know that that really can increase high quality, that can, you know, make some high quality work. Some people said, you know, I don't know if I heard a driving question. You're absolutely right. I didn't hear one either. Some people said, you know, it looks like there was some content, like we were doing a lot of writing and speaking. You know, I heard a little bit about the Great Depression, but I didn't quite see that as much. I heard in terms of 21st century skills, the kids were collaborating, trying to be creative. So yeah, so the reason I like to show that project is that it's got some great things going for it. But you know what? It could be missing something. And that's okay. It's not the end of the world. It just goes to show you that a project is never perfect. Okay? It's never perfect. Okay? So I just want to let that one go. Okay? Because I know that we are perfectionists as teachers. We want to create the perfect, most awesomest thing that will ever happen in the world, but it may not happen. And I know when I do projects, some literally flop, and I'm like, I will never do that again. Right? Now with this one, the other thing I want to highlight is you can look at that project and go, it's really quite good. Maybe it could be even better with some additions, right? That's the other thing to think about is sometimes you can do a project, it works really well, and you go, if only I had that element, I could even make it just a little bit better, right? And so that's what really PBL is all about. When you look at these essential elements, they're nothing new. They're nothing new. This is not new stuff. You would probably look at that and go, yeah, I do that stuff. I'm not. Yeah, well, exactly. But I think what PBL does maybe well is that it kind of ties all those things together. It leverages all of these practices and things we've done and ties it up in a nice little bow so that you can do all of them in one project. So that's kind of why I wanted to show that. So again, I just want to remind you about these elements, but this time I'm going to frame it through the lens of assessment. Not just what they are, but why they're there in terms of assessment practices. So one of the elements is significant content, right? That's an important thing, as in, what are your outcomes, right? If you don't know what outcomes you're hitting in the project, we got a problem, right? What ones are you hitting, right? And you should know that. One thing that I do, just to think about it, now, there is a tendency, because PBL projects are often big, you could hit a lot of outcomes, you really can. But are you really hitting them? Really have to reflect on that when you design. I use this metaphor. Are you buying or window shopping? You know what I mean? So when you go out to the mall, okay, West Edmonton Mall, which I happen to go to because I have a shopping problem myself. So when I go there are things that I'm looking at. Those are my window shopping. And then there are those things that, yeah, I buy. Okay? So think about that. The ones that you buy, the outcomes that you buy are the ones that kids are really, really walking away with. And they're the ones that you are for sure assessing in your project, right? Sometimes you learn things, but do you assess it? Not always, right? But for a project, you need to know which ones you're truly assessing. You should also make sure that a project teaches and assesses a 21st century skill. Now, at the Buck Institute's website, they have rubrics for this, for creativity, in fact, for collaboration, for critical thinking, and for communication, so you can download them and have fun with them. And I do mean that. Assess. I didn't say grade. I said assess. Okay? You don't need to grade everything, okay? But I think you should assess. Because here it is. If I want my kids to be good collaborators, for example, don't they need to know what that is and where they are and how to improve that? I can't just, and I joke about this, I say, here, you need to be more creative. Go. Not very helpful, right? Not very helpful because I don't even know what you're talking about. So you have to have a rubric that really breaks it down. And most teachers, when they design their project, pick one to focus on. Now, you can select a lot more of the things for your transform document, for example, like global citizen, entrepreneurial, right? Empathy, all those good things you want for kids, that could be something you assess in a project as well. And the whole point of assessment is to assess deeper learning, right? Not that surface level of learning. We know that inquiry leads to deeper learning, so that's why we have inquiry there in terms of assessment. Now, the driving question, you're probably going, why are you talking about driving question and assessment? Well, if you have a good driving question, it will point you in the direction of the outcomes that you want to assess. It helps to focus so that when kids have that need to know, like you guys did, they are actually asking questions that connect to the learning that you want in that project. That's why we spend so much time on the driving question, because it's got to focus the learning and focus the outcomes that you want to hit. So that's why we have that driving question for assessment. The need to know allows students voice in what they need to know in order to meet the outcomes, right? Not just you need to know this because Mr. Miller is telling you so, but what do you need to know based on this project so that they go, I don't know about this, I don't know about this. And it allows you to work smarter in the project to figure out, wow, they already know this or they don't know this. I better do my due diligence as a teacher to make sure that students are on the right path. And in terms of voice and choice, this is where you can allow students for space in how they show what they know, right? And we know that works. We know that works. And remember, voice and choice is actually a continuum. It's not opening up the floodgates and saying, go, do whatever you want. It's not that. Now, it's about limited voice and choice. It's about meeting in the middle, like a menu, and then it is like the more the better. But you get to choose as a teacher what is appropriate for my kids, what's appropriate for me, what's appropriate this time of year, what's appropriate for this project, right? That's your decision. You get to control the voice and choice, but you need to allow for it in the assessment process. And then revision and critique, in terms of assessment, allows students to know that they can get better at what they're doing, that they can fail forward. Okay? Fail forward. Kids are going to mess up. Why? Because that's learning. And with critique and revision and reflection, students can learn from their experiences and learn better, like get better at that, right? And it really teaches students that it's never too late to learn. It's never too late to learn. And by doing this, you're encouraging that with kids. And of course, with public audience helps to create that authentic assessment component, right? Many people were asking about that. What about authentic assessment? Well, if you have a great public audience, that's going to build the authenticity of the assessment so that you have real people involved in assessing, and it increases the quality of the assessment, right? I'm sure many of you have brought real-life people into that to evaluate or look at student work. When students know that's going to happen, they go, oh my goodness, I don't want to look silly, and they usually rise to the challenge. So that's why we have those elements. So I've just kind of framed the elements, but from the assessment lens. That's why I kind of wanted to do that. So something that I hear a lot from teachers, and something I'm going to model for you now, is this idea of, okay, Andrew, I totally get it. I get PBL, I get this part, but how do you design the assessments for a project? Like, how do you do that? I've got a good idea. I got a great driving question. You know, I'm raring to go. I just need some help with assessment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little bit of modeling and thinking aloud and unpack for you all on how I might do that for a sample project so that you can go, okay, I see how Andrew did that, or I see the steps there. And I'm going to involve you in that process as well and try to make connections to your disciplines and content area. So let's say I was going to do this project that was done by a teacher. It's cool school rules. It's got a pretty straightforward driving question. How do we stay safe in our community? Okay? This is actually a project that was done at elementary, but interestingly enough, when you look at this question, I'm sure many of you are going, I feel like I could do that project maybe at 9th grade with a little bit of a twist, or maybe at 12th grade, or maybe down at kinder. We could do it just a little bit differently. It really is an opportunity to think about how you might attack this at your own grade level, right? You could maybe slightly shift that driving question, do some small changes. But in this case, I'm going to model it for like a K1 class. That's really what I'm going to do. So once you have a good project, right, you obviously need to make sure that you have some great outcomes that connect with the project. Some people start with the outcomes and then create the project. Some people already have a project idea and connect the outcomes. That's fine, as long as you're getting outcomes. We're all happy. So it doesn't really matter which comes first, the chicken or the egg at this point. So as you do that, though, something that you have to think about is what outcomes do I want demonstrated in these products that they produce, right? What are the ones for sure that they must do, all right? And when I work with teachers and when I think about it myself, I have a whole year of curriculum and outcomes I have to hit, and it can be a little bit daunting. So I look for the best fit. I look for the best fit. Where does this fit? Where do I have the time? Where do I feel like this is going to be the right fit for the, like, where are my, I call it like the meaty outcomes, right? The ones, the big kahunas, right? The ones that, like, they deserve to be a PBL project. That's where you go. That's where you go, and that's where I'm going with this. And frankly, I know that one of the important outcomes here at Edmonton Catholic Schools is digital citizenship, and that is a K through 12 thing, right? This is a K through 12 thing. We all got to work on this because, oh, our kids and digital citizenship, right? Oh, that newfangled Snapchat and Instagrams and the Twitter and the Book of Face, right? Oh, so it's a great opportunity to teach those skills, right? And you can do this across grade level. I'm actually making this connection. See how I can hit outcomes that are across grade level? But the next step is if this is my outcome, my big, large outcome, I can't give this outcome to the kids. They won't know what I'm talking about. So I need to make very clear I can statements that are in student-friendly language as much as possible, okay? So for example, here are some that I literally took, okay, from Dan Duran and Danny Moss. They helped me out with this, okay? And so to make sure that we were having outcomes that were literally from your curriculum, okay? This is directly from them. And as you can see, these are obviously ones that we're probably going to use at maybe the lower elementary, like I said, K1. And these are the ones that I would focus on maybe for the project. And maybe not all of them. Maybe this is just the start. Maybe as I design my project, I'm going, maybe not that one. I'm going to get rid of that I can statement. And so you as a teacher need to backwards design and go, what are my I can statements based on the outcomes that I want? Man, oh man, this is a little bit challenging. So in the spirit of that, I'm actually going to turn it over to you guys. I'm going to have you think about your classroom, your grade, okay, and your kids. Let's pretend for a moment that you are going to engage in this PBL project that I just talked about a safe community and digital citizenship, something like that. You might change the driving question, but that's the general gist. I want you to just kind of write and think about I can statements for this project at your grade level. Where do I want you to do this? I want you to do this on these wonderful pieces of paper and markers that you have in front of you. Start brainstorming and writing possible I can statements that you would teach in your content area and curriculum. You will also do this back at the schools as well. Let's try this out now. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Welcome back. I encourage you to continue this conversation and perhaps steal this project idea as we move forward. You're already starting some work. You might consider this as a project maybe next year that you could do. Maybe it's cross-curricular. I also noticed in the conversations you had a really good convo about what's most appropriate, like what subject areas would be most appropriate, right? And again, just to echo the point of the right fit. You want to find the right fit. But you're also discovering you can hit many outcomes in a project. That's the cool part here. So we can hit lots of outcomes in a project. And I always say this, the longer the project, the more the outcomes. Only makes sense, right? You're not going to hit one outcome and spend 4 weeks on it. Really? I don't know. It scares me a little bit. But you definitely want to hit multiple outcomes. That's super important. So once you've figured out the outcomes, you've broken them down into some very specific I can statements that students will find meaningful and can understand, right? You need to obviously figure out how are they going to show what they know, right? We're really trying that backwards design process here. How will they show what they know? So we can talk all day about different types of products students can create. So one of the elements of PBL is voice and choice. And so I want to give students voice and choice in how they show what they know. Now, how much voice and choice I give them, I don't know. It depends on the year, depends on how they are, depends on, if they know that product, if it's going to be hard. Like if they don't know how to use PowerPoint, do I really want to spend time teaching that? So I've got to really think intentionally about the level of voice and choice that I allow. However, you'll notice the key word up there is authentic products. Not just products, authentic. So this is where I push a little bit. And I say to you, can we please move away from a standardized test? Please, please, please. I have, out of fear, assigned a great project with some great products, and then I assigned them a test. I bet you can guess what happened. They stopped caring about their work and the products and went to test. And now my products are icky. And that was my fault. So if you assign a test and a product, you're actually shooting yourself in the foot a little bit. It might distract students from really putting 110% into their products to show what they know. Now, along the way, I totally hear this, but Andrew, they have to take tests. That's the big world. I get you. So you know what I would recommend? Embed smaller standardized test prompts, quizzes, like short answers, along the way as formative assessments. So what are you doing there? First of all, you're formatively assessing, which is awesome. And second of all, you're inadvertently practicing. You're quote-unquote test prepping. But you're doing so not in a high-stakes, freak-out, and frankly boring test prep type of way. You know that okay, let's take a week out and do big old IB test prep. Whee! Nobody likes that. I don't like that. They don't like that. So we don't. We just do it all the time. So think about that. That way you're inadvertently, you're helping them with the test, but you're also honoring the product work. You're honoring them putting their 110% in there. Okay, that's super important. A quick reminder that as they do this work, students, and there are team products, and there are individual products in a project. For example, you saw in that one that we saw, there was a group multimedia component, and there was an individual written component and profile. But do remember that regardless of that, you are still measuring individual student competency, right? So I'm going to talk a little bit about, well, how do I make that work for this project, for example? Like, if they're working in a team, how can I assess anything, right? Like, can I assess? I can't assess that they know something if, 3 of us are working together, can I? That's kind of weird. So I kind of want to talk about that. So for individual products, you know what? I'm going to be a little limited in the choice for this. One, because I'm thinking about an elementary classroom. I'm thinking about first grade, and I don't want to overwhelm kids. So I'm not going to give them much of a choice here too much in the actual product. I'm going to ask that they do a public service announcement and also have a written script with pictures and storyboards and words. Okay, because I want to assess some writing and some digital citizenship stuff, etc. So I'm going to do that for an individual product, right? However, I also want them to collaborate because that's what I want for my kids. I want them to learn how to collaborate. So I'm going to actually think about maybe a team product they might do, right? And maybe I will give them some choice here. I'm going to allow them to choose between a skit, because kids like to do skits, or a poster presentation. I'm going to ask them to do that, and they're going to get up and they're going to talk and demonstrate. So I'm going to do that. So you're probably going, okay, I get that, but how do I? Is that good? The answer is yes. Just kind of flip back and forth between this. You do not have to assess the same outcomes in the products. For example, in the individual product, like I said, writing, digital citizenship, socials content. In the group, what am I going to assess over there? Not that. I'm going to assess collaboration, and I'm going to assess speaking skills, persuasive speaking skills. Look at that. Now I'm hitting even more outcomes. So think creatively, work smart. Think about in those different products how you can hit multiple outcomes, right? And outcomes that make sense, right? Because in that group thing, if I know each person's part that they've written, maybe I can assess writing. If I know that this was this part, their part, and this part, if I knew intentionally. But speaking makes sense because they're all going to have to get up, they're all going to have to talk, and I can assess those skills. Same thing, collaboration. I can't assess collaboration if I'm only doing something by myself, right? I need a team for that. So that's okay. So think about that. As you design your projects and products, it's okay to assess different outcomes in your team and your individual product. It's totally fine to do that. And obviously, on the individual one, you probably want to be more content heavy, right? Like content and skills on that individual. And then the other stuff like speaking, listening, collaboration, maybe some of the 21st century skills can be done in that team product. So just know that. And of course, the next step is now that you got your products, how do we make sure it's like really good learning, right? And not just pretty. Not just pretty, because kids will make things pretty. They'll put glitter on everything, okay? And I get that, all right? Like they'll take Elsa stickers from Frozen and just go for it. Like, so how do I make sure that that I honor that, I'm still ensuring high quality learning, right? This has to be about learning, not just pretty. So one step, obviously, is to have a checklist. Sure, checklists are good. I'm sure you all use checklists. You all use checklists. Everyone uses checklists. I love checklists. Here's the problem, though, with checklists. There's actually a challenge with checklists. Checklists don't always ensure quality. They might help move students toward a quality product, but they don't always have quality language. For example, let's say I want a checklist, and I really want in their script to have complete sentences, right? And I want to make sure there are, 4 paragraphs. I'm just kind of arbitrarily throwing things out. Just because I have 4 paragraphs doesn't mean they're good. Just because I have complete sentences doesn't mean that we're writing, either certain types of sentences. You know what I mean? So checklists are a good start, and I recommend them. It is a tool, but you're really going to need a great rubric. You're going to need a high-quality rubric that has some of those statements in it that's a little bit better. Okay, that's going to really, and I'm not saying this is a perfect one, but you want something that's kid-friendly. So you could combine, now obviously in the older grades, it can be more word-heavy. At the younger grades, probably not as many words, right? And that's the thing, is the rubric has to be understandable to kids. Here's another thing about that rubric and assessment in PBL. Do not give the rubric to students on the first day. Imagine, you are going to do a project and all of a sudden, do all this now. That's a little scary, huh? That's a little overwhelming, and you know what? I don't even know what you're talking about, because like a rubric will say, you use proper integers to what is an integer? I don't even know what you're, that's the issue. So you need to wait to give the rubric to students when they're ready for it. So when are they ready for it? When they have some background knowledge, some, not all, but some, and they have something with which to reflect upon, produced something that so they can go, this is what I have, where do I need to go? If they have nothing, you know what's going to happen to that rubric? Garbage. Bye-bye. Literally, I don't care about this. They're going to throw it away. So you need to give it to them when they're ready, when it's understandable, and when they have something. And again, I like to design rubrics with outcomes in mind, and so I have them as my criteria, or I break down the outcomes into more outcomes, like maybe it's outcome number 1A and then outcome number 1B and break it down. And then I steal language from the outcome, right? I try to make it into student-friendly language, and maybe I use images as well if I'm doing it at younger grades, and I do I can statements. So that whatever product students are producing, I can even have the same rubric. Right? I can write this, I can explain this, I can describe this, which saves you the time because, oh, I'm sure you guys want to spend all weekend making a rubric. I'm sure that's exactly what you want to do, right? Nope, nobody wants to do that. The other thing about this, notice how the approaching and the exceeding are gone. You can do this. You can do this with kids. It's really great to co-construct rubrics with kids, giving them bad examples, good examples, and using the center area and say, well, what do you guys think? What's exceeding? What's approaching? What do you guys think? Kids are smart. Kids, and you can co-construct with them, and now they're owning the assessment process. They're internalizing what's expected of them. And they see what they could aim for even higher. So I love co-constructing rubrics. And again, it can be really picture-based. This is an example of speaking and listening skills at the kindergarten level. Okay? You can notice how it's got pictures, it's got smiley faces, and it does have some, I can or I statements about what they're demonstrating. In fact, I'll be honest, this is actually the 21st century skill that I would probably teach and assess in this project, right? And these, I just want to let you know, they're on our website that you can download for the 4 Cs. You can have fun and edit them and do whatever you need. I also recommend, if you're looking at this and going, I don't know if all my kids could really handle this entire rubric right now, okay, don't. Maybe just use 3 sections. Maybe start the year with 2, and then add another, and then do another unit or another project and add another, okay? So you can do that. This also highlights that you can now assess a 21st century skill. Why? Because you're describing to me what does presentation look like. And that's the important thing I want to remind people of here. So for time's sake, I'm going to move forward, and I'm going to talk about formative and summative. I'm just going to move right into that right now. And I encourage you to have a continued conversation about this, because it is an interesting thing to think about. So when we talk about formative and summative, because this is a need to know everybody wants to know about right now, it's right up there, is the difference between the two. So what's the purpose? Many of you will go, yeah, I know this. The purpose of formative is to improve instruction and provide students the feedback they need, right? I look at it and I know what I need to do. I look at this and it drives my instruction. I look at this and I go to a child and tell them what they need, right? Summative is to measure that. It's a measure of the measure of them at their competent level. That's what a summative is, right? And when does it happen? Formative all the time, along the way. It's part of the journey. I like to say this, assessment has to tell a story. If you only have summative, you are not telling the whole story. So you need to have in your project multiple benchmarks and check-ins for kids to make sure they're going along the way. And of course, when does that summative happen? Usually near the end, right? And of course, how do students use it? Remember, students need to use the assessments that you do. They should check in to process, how am I learning, what do I not know, what do I need to know? And again, you use it, of course, the summative is used to gauge, did they meet that in terms of the full grade, like 3rd grade? Are we on track for getting to 3rd grade? How do you use the results as teachers? To check for understanding, that's the intent there. And then, as a summative, the intent is for grades and promotion, right? So when people ask me, do you grade formatives? The answer, if we look at that, the answer is no. The answer is not that. That is not the intent of formative assessment, is to grade. And I know that really kind of grinds people's gears, because we assess the ways we used to be assessed, which frankly could have been really poorly, let's be honest, okay? For example, everyone remember getting that B on a paper, B+, and then going to the teacher and saying, hey teacher, why did I get a B+? And it says, because it was okay. How do I get an A? Well, you just got to work harder. Yeah, that was really helpful. So that's the other reason I like to push that. It's about assessing at the right moment. So a couple things to think about as you move forward with this, with formative and summative assessments. A formative is not a formative until you decide that it is in fact a formative. A summative is not a summative until you decide in fact that it is a summative. You are professionals. You're in this field because you are professionals. You are smart, you are capable, you are wonderful teachers. You make the decision. How many have given a quiz one time? And the intent, again, was just to check in. You were not going to grade it, you just wanted to check in, or, and and it measured some knowledge or skills. You just wanted to check in. Or a worksheet, right? And you want to check in. And all of your kids, because you're a rock star teacher, and because this is the perfect class of the entire world, all got an A. That's happened to some of you, I'm sure, right? Where that's happened maybe once in a while. If that's the case, it was formative, now it's summative. Because why? Because they rock. Because that's what I should do. If they know it, shouldn't I reward them for knowing something? Yeah. Same thing, summative. I'm sure we've done this. We give them an end of unit test. Oh my goodness. Third of the kids failed. Formative. Right? Because you're a good teacher. And you're going, I can't do that to them. That's not fair. We got to fix something. We got to get better. So you're the professional in this. You decide whether or not a summative magically becomes a formative or vice versa, okay? But know that the intent of formative is to inform instruction, not necessarily to be graded. That's all I'm saying. But you decide. You got this. So when we talk about formative, a couple things, there's a process. There's feeding up. You have to know what you're formatively assessing. You have to check for understanding. You have to give good feedback. And this is the part where we really have to be smart as teachers. You have to feed forward. Here's what I mean by feed forward really quickly. So you remember that test I told you about? You give the test. The kids bombed. Like maybe half of them bombed because that happens, because that's life, right? They didn't know it. And you come back the next day and you decide to review the content with every kid in the classroom. No, stop it. What are you doing? That's crazy talk. Why would you do that? You know what you just did? You just made half of the class really bored. You just disengaged half of your class. You did. And I mean that. Formative assessment leads to student engagement. Why? Because if you're formatively assessing a student, you know what they need, and you give them what they need, and they know they need it, and they're engaged. If you formatively assess and that kid doesn't need the instruction, and then you're giving them the instruction they don't need, good night. They're going to fall asleep. So that's why when you do formative assessments, it allows you to work smarter to meet the needs of your kids. Why? You know whether or not one child needs your help, a group of students needs your help. In fact, sometimes the whole class. Global errors, small group errors, one-person errors. So this is why formative assessment is so important in a project. You're worried about the time it takes. If you're formatively assessing, you're going to create the pockets of time that you need for the work. Because as that small group that you've grabbed and pulled aside to work on a skill, guess what the other kids are doing? They're continuing their learning journey. So that's the cool part about formative assessment in a project. Because it links instruction. It's all about linking instruction. It leads to what instruction you're going to do and what I call just-in-time instruction. Instruction when kids need it, not when I'm guessing they need it. So there are a lot of ways to check for understanding. I just want to honor that. There are a lot of ways to do, and that's all about how am I doing. How many of you do this? Let's just kind of have a moment and just kind of reflect. We do this one, and this one, and this one, and this one, right? Everyone got that? Okay. Yeah, it's not the best check for understanding, is it? Not really. No, we got to do better than that, right? We could do. We're not bad, but we do. I do it all the time. You guys got that? All right, cool. That's not good, right? I didn't even wait. You guys got that? Okay, we're good. We need to be a lot more intentional about our formative assessments. Now, I know you're all going to be I like stuff. Okay, I'm a teacher. I need stuff. Theory, I got it. Move on. This has got some great stuff on theory, but also some really good practical tips. Okay, like stuff I can use tomorrow. Like I read it and I went, I can totally do that. So this book highlights a variety of ways you can formatively assess, from exit tickets to student response things to questioning to diagnostic questions. I also really like this book. It's got some great ways to check for understanding, how to use tests effectively, how to use oral language, how to use writing, all this good stuff. So I just want to let you know that there are resources out there. that will be made available to you about how to check for understanding effectively. So notice that some of these checks for understanding are kind of big, like a draft is big, but you know what else is a great check for understanding? Watching, like, hello, yeah, you know what's going on, or just asking a question to someone. There are lots of ways to formatively assess. Some of them are quick, some of them are a little more lengthy. You have to decide that. So one tool you can use, and we're not going to have time to do this today, is you can look at your project assessment map, and I've got them here. They're in the pink forms. You'll see a blank one. I encourage you to think about a project that you're doing and backwards design and think about all the assessments that are going to happen. So when you look at this form, just to kind of quickly walk you through it, you think about the final product, you think about the outcomes that you want to assess, and then you think about those check-ins. And you'll see I did a couple examples for you just as a model. I think it's important to see different models of what that might happen. And as you look at this, look at the traditional stuff that you probably already do, right? I'm doing the same thing there. So I just want to let you know that is a tool that you can do when you leave today and use in your planning. A couple more things that I want to mention before I let you go. Here's a couple more points. Feedback is really important. I know we all struggle with feedback. Not everything deserves to get written feedback. Not everything deserves to get written feedback. As in, if you get an exit slip from a kid, are you really going to write on all of them something? Maybe not. Now, if you get a draft, probably going to write on it, right? If you're just doing a quick check for understanding, maybe you gave them a math problem to do, right? Just really quick. Okay, maybe it's a homework assignment. And you're just looking at it. You don't have to give feedback on anything, but you do need to give feedback. And you have to find the right time and place to give really good feedback, either written or oral, to students. And it's got to be timely. It's got to be specific. It's got to be understandable. It's got to be actionable, okay? It's got to be really good feedback. And there's a lot of work out there that talks about what is good feedback and how do I make sure that it's fantastic. And again, once you've given good feedback, you still need to feed forward. And I want you to think about this as you check for understanding, okay? Let's say some student does something wrong on a math problem, but you know that kid, and you know that kid is competent. Why did they get it wrong? Ask yourself this: was it a mistake or was it an error? Two different things. Mistake implies they know it, they just made a boo-boo. Error implies they have some conceptual gaps, like we need to do some work. Mistake implies correction, but not instruction. Error implies instruction. So ask yourself that when you check for understanding in a project, is it a mistake or is it an error? So, to finish up again, I know you have these need to know up here. I hope I got to answer most of them, but I do want to say this. Keep these need to knows, and everyone back at their schools, use these need to knows as possible topics for professional learning in the future. I'm sure we didn't answer everything, but these will be some great questions to answer in the future. So with that, I wanted to say thank you for being here in person and live. Appreciate it.
As usual, Andrew has done a wonderful job of giving us lots of provocations for where to go next with project-based learning and assessment, and we thank you out there in the schools for joining us this afternoon. And in here from St. Anthony, all of the schools, thank you so much for your participation. This session was recorded this afternoon, and it will be on our Transform website within 7 days approximately. And I'll send out a link to make sure you have access to it, as well as to the curriculum redesign team. So thank you to everyone, including our presenters. Thank you again.